Hello, everyone. It says I'm live. Hopefully, this is working. Happy Friday to you. It's Sam with a quick video for today. I'm not going to take too long. I'm doing another book review. Before I do, let me ask you the question, as I always do. A good writer must also be a good reader. So, what are you reading these days, and how will it influence your writing? I'm trying to answer those questions. And I will give you my answer in just a few minutes. Before I do, I want to quickly turn our attention to a couple of new things that are coming up or have been coming out. I started my podcast, Fractured Fiction. So far, it's just honestly, it's repurposing my existing video content from some of these videos. But the past 6 months of writer tips, author interviews, um, reviews, writing discussions, book discussions, things like that. I'm doing it on a podcast called Fractured Fiction. It's available on Spotify, Google Podcasts, and Anchor. So go there and search for Fractured Fiction. You should be able to find it. Right now, I'm posting new episodes on Monday, Wednesdays, and Fridays. So look for that. Second thing, 1 week from today, I'm doing an author chat with a friend of mine. His name is Eric Steidl. His website is steidlstories.com. That is STEIDL stories.com. And he's written a young adult, I guess, biblical historical fiction novel called Ayal the Arrow Boy. You can read more about it on his website, so that's steidlstories.com. But he's agreed to do an author chat interview with me. I'm doing that a week from today, July 23rd, Friday, I think around the same time, 11 a.m. CST, noon EST. Yeah, there's an event page, an event link on my author page, Samuel N. Harris. Scroll down and look for it. But that's happening a week from today, and I hope you can join us and ask some questions to a published author. So yeah, should be exciting times. Let me quickly answer you my question of what am I reading these days and how will it influence my writing. I'm reading this book. It is called Star Wars: Thrawn Ascendancy, Chaos Rising. Sorry, no, Chaos Rising was the previous one. This is Greater Good by Timothy Zahn. Yes, it has two colons, two subtitles. If you didn't know already, I'm a big fan of Star Wars, a big fan of the Star Wars books. Um, and so it's going to kind of talk about the one I'm currently reading. But the thing is, I realized in doing so, I'd be comparing it to the other ones that I've read by this author. This is one of the possibly most prolific authors of Star Wars books, and he's one of my favorites that I've followed consistently. Timothy Zahn is. So I've read, I think now, I think when I finish this one, this is the newest one he's written. I think when I finish it, I will have read all of his Star Wars books. Um, so I realized in reviewing it, I'd be inherently comparing it to other ones that he's done. So I'll kind of give just a quick overview, if I can, in 10 15 minutes of just these books, what I like about them, what I don't like about them, what they mean to me, that kind of thing. So everyone knows Star Wars. You may not have read the Star Wars books. That's okay. Quick introduction to that. These books deal with a character called Grand Admiral Thrawn. Okay, if you haven't heard of him, if you're not familiar with who he is a blue-skinned alien. I have a picture of him here. A blue-skinned alien in the Empire. He's a Grand Admiral in the Empire. If you watch the show Star Wars Rebels, it's on Disney Plus. He's featured in that as a villain, and of course, spoilers, but he was name dropped in the last season of The Mandalorian. So it looks like they're adapting him into the television world. And I think he's going to be part of the Ahsoka show. So that should be interesting. But he originated in the books, in the Star Wars books, and the original books he originated in is this trilogy, or this is the first of the trilogy. It came out in the early 90s. The trilogy is called the Thrawn trilogy. Usually, the first book is called Heir to the Empire. Still Timothy Zahn. He's the same author who's written Thrawn consistently. The books are Heir to the Empire, Dark Force Rising, and The Last Command. They came out in the early 90s. I read them when I was in high school and kind of got hooked on the Star Wars novels. Well, I read like young adult ones before that, but I got hooked on the full-length Star Wars novels. The thing is, those are no longer canon, which means they don't really line up with the new movies. So, like, The Force Awakens and The Last Jedi and all that stuff, they don't fit in with that timeline anymore because when Disney is making those movies, they decided not to acknowledge that. So if you read these books, the first trilogy that came out, they're fun stories, but you might be confused. They won't match the new movies. So if you care about that, just be warned. They take place a few years after Return of the Jedi. So Luke, Han, and Leia are still relatively young, and they're fighting the remnants of the Empire. I mean, the Empire fell, but it still exists. That's a concept they used even in Mandalorian too. And basically, Thrawn is now the main guy or the main leader of what's left of the Empire. and so Luke, Han, and Leia have to go up against him. It's fun stuff. And Thrawn has been compared to like a Sherlock Holmes or a Spock figure. I mean, he's not a villain in the same sense as Darth Vader, who's like brute force and scariness and intimidation. Thrawn is more like a cold, calculating, strategic, tactical mastermind. I mean, he is a tactical mastermind. He's one of those characters who like puts the details together and like sees the patterns and uses that to kind of predict how the battle will go and just like make these calculations in his head. So more of a subtle, in some ways, quiet, reserved villain. Not like openly hostile like Vader, but I mean he's still working for the Empire. So someone even questioned if he's a villain or not. I mean, he's working for the bad guys. He's on the bad side, but he himself, I mean, he desires order and stability more than he desires like terror or cruelty or whatever. So in that first trilogy, he was the bad guy. On Rebels, he's the bad guy because again, the Rebellion and the Jedi are the good guys. But and there's been several other books by Zahn that are now in the Legends not canon section. But in the past few years, he started writing new ones that do fit within the canon. This is the first of those. It's called just Star Wars Thrawn. It came out in 2016, 17. Yeah, and it's basically about how he rose to power in the Empire. So basically, he's been adapted from the non-canon into the canon. So basically, those stories where he fights Luke and Leia and Han, those don't count anymore. But Thrawn is still an Imperial. He's rising through the ranks, and it's interesting because in these trilogies, he's not the bad guy. I mean, you could say he's an anti-hero, maybe sometimes almost a hero. I'm not sure if it goes that far for him, but he's definitely the protagonist. Obviously, it's about him rising to the ranks of the Empire and kind of coming to power and helping to defeat their enemies. I mean, some of which are also bad guys. I mean, just because the Empire is bad doesn't mean all their enemies are good. Sometimes bad guys fight bad guys. Anyway, so basically, there's a trilogy about that, about him, his early days in the Empire. And the one that's coming out now is his days before the Empire, in what's called the Chiss Ascendancy. Thrawn is a Chiss, that's the name of his race, and he's part of their military, which is the Chiss Ascendancy. So this is the second book of that trilogy, the Ascendancy trilogy. I think the third one's coming out later this year, but this is the newest one, just came out, I think, in April or something. And I'm reading it now, and I'm about 3/4 of the way through. So yeah, quick overview. Basically, he was a bad guy. It still kind of is, depending on who you ask. But in these two newer trilogies, he is the protagonist of his own story, and he's a hero, if we use the term loosely, against other bad guys. So that's cool. So let me tell you quickly what I like and don't like about these stories, and I'll try to, is what I could say, so I'll try to condense this. Timothy Zahn is really good at writing these complex plots that just fit together really well. I mean, you kind of have to be if you're dealing with a character who like pays attention to the small details, and who like deduces things and like predicts patterns and is cold and calculating. I mean, you as the author have to be like that's somewhat too. It's hard for me to define or describe because I don't think I'm good at writing that story. It's almost like a mystery novel, and I mean, it doesn't share much similar with the mystery genre. So I forget I said that, but in the sense of like different clues or different pieces coming together, and like one character, again, he's been compared to Sherlock Holmes. One character can see all the patterns and figure out from there like who's behind it or what to do or everything. That's kind of how Thrawn is and kind of how these books are. So I have a hard time describing the plots because they're, well, one, each one is unique, and two, they're so complex that I don't think I could write one quite like that. But they come together at the end in a way that makes you go mind blown kind of thing. I have called Timothy Zahn the Christopher Nolan of books. I mean, Christopher Nolan's my favorite director, but he does a similar thing with how he brings plots together. And one I'll recommend, one book I'll recommend that does this really well is also by Zahn. It's called Star Wars Scoundrels. I don't have a copy here. I think my wife was reading my copy and didn't finish it, which is fine. I'm glad she started reading it, but I'm not sure my copy is now. Star Wars Scoundrels. It's about Han Solo, Chewbacca, and Lando Calrissian. So it doesn't even have Thrawn in it. It's a one-off adventure. It's a heist. I actually met Timothy Zahn at AwesomeCon a few years ago, and he told me it's basically like Star Wars Ocean's 11. So it's a heist, which you know will be with Han and Lando. But if you know those characters, you also know it's not going to go well, or I mean, like things are there's going to be twists and turns and things that don't go according to plan. And Scoundrels contained lots of twists and turns, even up to the last line. The last line of the whole book was a plot twist too that revealed. I wouldn't tell you, but one character was actually this other character who was recognized from the movies, and I was like, so yeah, he does these big complex plots that are very rewarding once they come together, and that's kind of what's kept me interested in them and in this character who I've followed, and in this kind of author and writing style who I've followed now since high school. Um, Things I don't like, harder to find. Also, I would say, I mean, I still enjoy these books a lot, but I don't know. Now that I'm older and I've read several by the same author about the same character, I'm beginning to see the patterns. I don't know if the writing quality has actually changed or if it's just my perception now that I'm older and I can see the strings. You know, I first read those back in high school. I didn't have 2 degrees in literature yet. I do now. And sometimes analyzing literature can take you out of the story. I still enjoy analyzing it, and when it's a really good story, analyzing doesn't take me out of it. But sometimes I get distracted, and I'm like, oh yeah, that kind of is a noticeable thing. Um, I will say also, yeah, I mean, well, yeah, a few different points. Like when he does these big complex plots, there's a lot of build up, and usually there's a big payoff at the end. But sometimes it takes a while to get there, or sometimes I get lost in the details of the build up. It may just be me. But that's kind of how it is. So this one, I'm 3/4 of the way through, and I feel like the plot's going to carry into the third book, which is coming out later this year, because like um, there's actually the main villain, or the villain who was foreshadowed at the end of the previous one, like hasn't even appeared much yet. He's still kind of in the shadows. The heroes haven't even encountered him. He's some figure called Jixtus. They've named him, but like we don't know anything about him or where he comes from. And I'm like, we're 3/4 of the way through, so I have a feeling that threat's going to carry into the next book too. So there is a payoff coming, I assume, but it's just the build up sometimes can seem slow by some people's standards. Can take a while to get there. We're also dealing with more of an ensemble cast now. Now that I've followed several of these, we're dealing with like the other Chiss military and Thrawn's allies and things like that, and other subplots going on. So Thrawn himself has appeared relatively little in this book. I mean he's in it obviously, but there's and he's supposed to be the main character, but there's like whole chapters that he's not in because it's about other characters too. So I feel like the story is building, but I'm not there yet, and I bet it's going to continue into book 3 as well. So if you're not patient with plots like that, be advised. You know, I usually like that kind of thing, but I admit, I mean, in our postmodern, fast-paced social media culture of instant gratification, I can get impatient with things like that too. Yeah, so I'm enjoying it. It's a fun book. It's light, you know, escapist reading. I took it on vacation. I don't have to think too hard usually, in general. But it's but I mean it's more than some. I don't know. Very basic fiction. I mean, it's still complex, well written commercial fiction. But yeah, it's can be hard to stick with it and follow and that kind of thing. There were some technical things I noticed that like as creative writers we kind of we kind of like shy away from. Like he used sad a lot, and we say, oh, don't use sad, or like he said a character sounded surprised like twice in a row. We're like, oh, show don't tell. So those kind of stuck out to me again. Maybe now that I'm a little older, I can see the strings more, and that's kind of bothering me too, or not bothering me, just little annoyances, things like that that I catch now that I'm a creative writer and trying to do those things, trying to avoid and be aware of those things in my own writing. But maybe it's good or helpful or nice to know that someone who is successful at writing commercial fiction can actually do those things and get away with them sometimes, at least once you have some measure of success. And the other thing I'll say, well, two more points. Again, about seeing the strings more, I feel like he's a bit hammered the reader over the head at times with like some of the points about the character development. Like Thrawn, again, he's a tactical mastermind, but he's one of those characters. He's the trope of someone who's like brilliant, but doesn't understand emotions or doesn't understand interpersonal relationships, or as this book phrases it, politics. He's really good in the military, but when it comes to like shifting political allegiances, like diplomacy and and like interpersonal politics. He's not so good at that. Which I get it. I mean, it's a trope. Some versions of Sherlock Holmes have been like that, or Spock, or even say Sheldon Cooper if we're going to the comedy route. It's a common trope of a character, but like the last book, I feel like multiple characters reiterated just verbally at different times. Like Thrawn is a great military expert, but he doesn't understand politics, and I'm like, okay, we get it. Like the author doesn't have to keep reminding us of that. So I feel like some of those points are overemphasized, and some of them, if you read all the books like I have, they get repetitive. And that's the last point I'll make too. Thrawn, I think, is mostly a static character. He hasn't changed a whole lot over the course of the timeline. These are origin stories. I was kind of hoping, like, oh, maybe we'll see his rise to power. Maybe we'll see how he became such a brilliant mastermind. And so far it hasn't really done that much. I mean, it feels like he's already the same Thrawn. He's already winning and using his mental prowess to save the day and things like that. He even had like a professional relationship with a female colleague in the military, and I was like, is this like almost a romance? Like, are they gonna give him like a romantic backstory? And I mean, obviously the romance isn't the focus of these books, but I was like, could there at least be like a failed potential almost romance in his past, and kind of that's why he's like so alone today? And I'm like, no, and then they didn't really go in that direction. Didn't really do anything with that. So maybe I was hoping for more character development, and he is a static character. He's not one who changes a lot. But like, I mean, even in these early stories, he's already like the calculating mastermind who's winning and saving the day. That's just who he is. And I mean, I know we like to read stories about people who win and save the day and are exceptional, and that's great. But some of us also like to read stories about like characters who are flawed and human. And I don't know, maybe if I was, I mean, he's literally an alien, and the books take place in different galaxies. So if I was looking for a human character who's down to earth, maybe I'm looking in the wrong place. Again, fun commercial fiction, well-written commercial fiction, but still commercial, not literary. So I'm not saying it's like a masterpiece of literature or anything like that. But I enjoy them. So all that being said, I do feel like I mean, someone who started reading these in high school and now is still reading them. I do feel like some of the magic from the early days is gone. I mean, I can't be objective entirely. I can't tell you that's because the writing quality has changed, or if I just am older, my perspective has changed and I notice it more, or both. But maybe some of it's just nostalgia. We always think the older ones are better. But I still enjoy the books. I'm still reading them. I'm still going to get the third one when it comes out. And if Zahn does more Star Wars stuff, I'm sure I'll look for that too. But I just feel like some of the magic is gone from the early days in the ways I can't quite quantify. And the formulas are repeating themselves. And I still know the formulas. So it's not quite the same as when you read a book or read something new for the first time. Hard to recapture the magical feeling. That being said, I still like them, still enjoying them, still looking forward to seeing where this goes. I still like the character of Thrawn. I'll probably keep following him. So yeah, that's what I'm reading. Hope in positive or negative ways. I guess either by following the example or changing or avoiding the example, it may influence my own writing. I'm not sure if I can quite capture a plot as complex as Zahn does, but I'll try. I'm almost out of time, so I just want to give you quick recommendations. If anyone is interested in getting into the Star Wars books, if this is something that you're interested in, I'll tell you where to start. Well, if you don't care about canon, like it won't bother you or upset you to contradict the new movies, start with this, Heir to the Empire, by Timothy Zahn, and these are all Zahn. Heir to the Empire, Dark Force, Rising of the Last Command. Start with that trilogy if you don't care about the canon. If you do care about canon, like it'll bother you if it doesn't fit with the movies. Start with this one, Star Wars Thrawn, came out a few years ago. If you just want a one-off adventure, like it's a doesn't affect the plot at all, doesn't even have Thrawn, it has the characters you're familiar with from the movies, I'd say go read Scoundrels. Those are all by Timothy Zahn. So those are my recommendations. Again, see you next time. And in the meantime, keep reading, keep writing, keep doing your thing. And hope to see you at our author event with Eric Stuttle next week, next Friday the 23rd. Bye. Have a great day. Thanks. May the 4th be with you.